Welcome. All right, so I guess again, welcome to our ORCID workshop for researchers. We do this workshop pretty much at least 4 times a year. So thank you for joining us here today. So my name is Paulo Guhilde. I'm the strategist for the ORCID US community. I do have my colleague here as well, Sheila Rabin, who's our senior strategist for research infrastructure programs at Lyrasis, and another colleague, Kayla Ramit, who's our program assistant for the ORCID US community. All right, so just for our agenda for today, we're going to talk about um, what is ORCID, and then we're going to take a look at basically what the ORCID ID is and the ORCID record and how ORCID can benefit you. And then we'll make sure that you know how to get your own ORCID ID if you don't already have one. And we'll cover a few tips for how to save time in populating your ORCID record with your information. So for those who may not be who may be unfamiliar, or as a refresher for those who already know, so we're going to go through what is ORCID. ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. The goal of ORCID is to uniquely identify you so that you can get credit and attribution for your work and streamline your digital identity so you can save time on administrative tasks while keeping track of all of your affiliations and contributions in one central place. ORCID is a nonprofit, community-driven organization that serves the entire global research community. ORCID provides researchers with what we call an ORCID ID. So it's a 16-digit number that is unique to you. So you can distinguish yourself from other researchers despite the complexities that come with identifying ourselves by name. Anyone can get their own ORCID ID for free, and it looks something like this. And what you're seeing here on the screen, which is from our volunteer, Sofia Maria Hernandez Garcia, and you will see her ORCID ID. You will also notice that the ORCID ID looks like a link, and that is because it is. Your ORCID ID links to what we call an ORCID record. So if you click on this ORCID link or this ORCID ID link, we are taken to Sophia's ORCID record, which is populated with information about her, similar to what we might see on a CV or resume. So information like her employment. We can also see that she has different names formations in the also known as sections. You'll see Sofia Garcia, S.M. Garcia, Sofia Maria Garcia. So those are the also known as section. And then we will also see some identifiers like the websites and social links, some other researcher identifiers, the email address if it's publicly available, as well as the country. And down below, you will also see research areas as well. So scrolling down on that CV, that online profile, we can see that Sophia also has her education and qualifications listed. We also see professional activities. So these professional activities such as membership, service, distinction, and invited positions. We will also see funding that Sophia has received. We will also see research resources, which are basically research equipment that she has used, and works such as publications that Sophia has written. Last but not the least, we can also see her peer review activity here. So if Sophia has peer reviewed in a journal, you will see that information here if that journal or that publisher pushed that information to their ORCID record. Now, let's talk about the benefits of ORCID. So ORCID distinguishes you from others, so that's a big part of that. Your ORCID ID also persists over time, even if your name changes or if anything else in your life changes. Your ORCID record can also bolster your digital identity, and ultimately, your ORCID record can save you time when you have to fill out forms that ask for information about you and your research activities. Additionally, many publishers and funders are starting to require ORCID IDs, um, ORCID IDs, and from authors and investigators. So if you have not already run into this, it's likely that you will in the future. So at the most basic level, ORCID ID distinguishes you and ensures your research input and activities are correctly attributed to you, so especially when you're publishing and working with other people, for example. Now, we're seeing in this PubMed abstract or this PubMed kind of information that there are not only multiple authors, but multiple authors with the same last name and the same first initial. So, looking at this, it's really impossible to distinguish who is who these researchers are, their credentials, institutional affiliations, or other research that they have contributed to. So if you look at the screen right now, we are just really looking at this as just names on the page with no additional context or identifying information. So if we're looking for an author named Sofia Garcia, there could be multiple people who identify with that name. But again, with ORCID, because Sophia's ORCID ID is unique, we can better distinguish her and her works and activities from other individuals. So ORCID helps to streamline your online digital identity in the research landscape. The ORCID ID is helpful because if there are other people who share your name, if your name has changed, or if you've used different variations of your name in the past, all of those things can be put in one. So with your ORCID ID. So your ORCID ID stays the same and can tie you to your affiliations and activities throughout your career. And that all of that is through your ORCID record. So when research contributions are findable, linked to the individuals involved, and centrally located in an ORCID record, data and deliverables can be more easily shared and reused. Researchers can find each other and make connections, and researchers get recognition for their work. So now let's keep talking about the benefits, but looking specifically at how ORCID can benefit you in the research landscape. So regardless of how popular your name is or whether your name has changed. When you think about at the very basic aspects of the activities that a researcher is involved in, so for example, you get a job somewhere at the university or agency or other type of organization, then you get funding to work on specific research. And then you do your research and publish the results. Then you have to report on your activities to your employer or report back to the organization that provided your funding, right? So if you look at this diagram, this is currently right now a very simplistic, and we know that things can get increasingly complex as you continue to work with more and more organizations over time. So ORCID helps to streamline this process, both for you as a researcher and also the organizations that you work with. When it comes to getting funding, for example, many funders, especially in the health sciences, not only ask or require that investigators provide their ORCID ID so the funder can distinguish you, but they also use ORCID to help you save time. So depending on what funder you're working with and what systems they are using, these are just a few of the funders that are using ORCID in their workflows. So some examples here are American Heart Association, for example, Melanoma Research Alliance. So they're using systems that integrate with ORCID. So this is just a way for us to take a look at how some funding systems will allow you to sign in using ORCID. So you don't have to remember yet another system password, for example. So this is an example from a system called Proposal Central, which many funders are using. Some funding systems will allow you to import information from your ORCID record directly into funding applications and also into progress reports that you don't have. So you don't have to spend time filling out forms and retyping everything over and over again. So the Proposal Central platform that I mentioned allows for this. And the example on this slide is from ScienceCV, which can be used to create a biosketch for NIH or NSF funding applications. So when you are creating a new biosketch, you can select ORCID as an external source, and the system will automatically pull in all of your information from your ORCID record. So this information such as your bio, employment history, and educational background. Then for the work citation, you can select ORCID and then select which citations you want to import into Science CV from your ORCID record. So basically you can select which citations you want to push into your bio sketch. And finally, when you're working on this, to make sure to click Save Citations, and this should add your selected citations to your bio sketch. So we've been hearing a lot lately about developments in Science CV, and we will talk about that in a little bit shortly. Also, one of the things that funders do, so some funders will actually add your funding award to your ORCID record for you. So you don't even have to update that yourself. So this is an example of funding that a researcher received from the Children's Tumor Foundation. And you can see that the source of this entry is the Children's Tumor Foundation, which means that the organization or the foundation itself added this funding information to our researcher's ORCID record on his behalf. So he did not have to enter it himself. So that makes it easier. All of that information is being pushed to ORCID. Now, let's talk a little bit about developments related to federal funding agencies and persistent identifiers. So persistent identifiers like ORCID. So we've been hearing in the last few years about NSPM 33, and in the next few years, we are going to be hearing more and more about this as all federal agencies that provide grant funding will be starting to require additional persistent identifier for investigators or encouraging researchers and investigators to have digital persistent identifier or what we call persistent identifiers. And with this, we are expecting that there's going to be more usage of ORCID. And you have to think that ORCID is a persistent identifiers for researchers and investigators or for individuals. So basically, that's one of the things that's going to be coming up in the next few years. Some of you are also familiar with this, with developments in Science CV, for example. So if your researchers are applying for NSF grant, you're going to be using the bio sketches that's available in Science CV, and you can use your ORCID information to push that data into Science CV. And I believe NSF is actually also requiring ORCID IDs now. And that also relates to also the same thing with NIH funding as well. So starting next year, we're looking at, I believe, the late May of next year, May 2025, NIH will start requiring senior and key personnel to enter their ORCID ID into Science CV. So basically, ORCID ID is required when it comes to NIH funding. And you'll be using this also, the bio sketches that's a form that's available in Science CV. Now, let's kind of move a little bit from funders to publishers. Um, Publishers do the same basic thing. Many of you already know that publishers often require or ask for your ORCID ID when you submit a manuscript. And publishers have been doing this even longer than funders. So these are just a few of the publishers that are using ORCID or perhaps asking ORCID. So like American Chemical Society, BMJ Journal, IEEE, and Springer Nature. The benefits here are similar to the funding workflows. Um, Publishing systems often allow for you to sign in using your ORCID, so you don't have to remember a different password for each publisher that you are working with. Sometimes publisher pre-fill forms with information from your ORCID record to help you save time with any information that you might want to submit to a publisher. So again, making that easier for you as the author, as the researcher when you're submitting your manuscript. And publishers will often automatically add your publication information to your ORCID record for you, which saves you even more time. So they could push the DOI metadata to your ORCID record. So it could either be via Crossref, which we'll talk a little bit later on. Now, from the research organization standpoint as well, research organizations, especially universities, are also increasingly using ORCID in their workflows. And these are just some of the examples that we have that are using ORCID in their institutions. So we have um, Cornell University, Emory, Florida State, Stanford. So all of these institutions and organizations have been using ORCID in their work, in their internal workflows as well. So similarly to funders and publishers, institutional systems can allow you to connect your ORCID ID with the organization or the institution. The example that you are seeing here is from Stanford University, where researchers can connect their ORCID ID with their Stanford ID in order to allow information to flow between their ORCID record and Stanford systems. Institutional systems like research information management systems or reporting systems are often set up to allow you to import information from your ORCID record so you don't have to re-enter information over and over again. So just make sure that your ORCID record is up to date. Then you can transfer your information to your university by clicking a button, as you can see from this example of Faculty 180, ORCID import at Boston College. And also, institutions can add information to your ORCID record for you. So, like your employment affiliation and any other relevant info where the source of the information will be the name of the institution rather than your own name. So, this adds a degree of authority and trustworthiness to the information in your ORCID record. So, for example, if you work at, say, um, Georgia State University, um, with their ORCID integration, they can push that employment information into your ORCID record. A few other areas where trusted organizations can add information to your ORCID record for you include peer review activities. So if you have served as a peer reviewer and provided your ORCID ID during that peer review work, it is possible to have your peer review activity automatically added to your ORCID record for you. As you can see here in this example, so when you connect your ORCID ID with Pablons, for example, and you have a peer review activity there, that can be pushed to your ORCID record. So you can see how basically um, that you have done this work, this service for the journal. And a new kind of section in ORCID record that organizations can add information to on your behalf is the research resources section, which keeps track of special labs, equipments, or facilities that you may have used in the course of your research. So, for example, What we're seeing here is that if you are using a giant laser kind of equipment, that can be pushed to an ORCID record. So if that organization is set up to do so. So if you're using, say, even an archival images, so if the library is set up to push that information to research resources in ORCID, they can push that information there as well. And one of the newest things that we have is actually this called record summary. So you can actually go to your ORCID record, click on show record, uh, record summary, and you will see this particular page where it will show you the different areas where, which of the records are validated with the check marks. So that means that organizations have pushed that to their ORCID record. And also, you will see, like, say, for example, in the works section, you have 3 validated works. So that means that an organization pushed that information to ORCID. So basically, ORCID is used by funders, publishers, and research organizations across the globe to uniquely identify the researchers they work with and to make any application and reporting requirements easier for researchers by allowing data to be transferred between ORCID records and local organizational systems. So in this graphic, you can see the researcher is at the center with their ORCID ID and their ORCID record. And then the organizations that a researcher works with are able to connect with the researcher through their ORCID ID. So to get that information about the researcher, but also to add relevant information to the researcher's ORCID record for them. Again, the idea of saving time. So this is really that for you and the organizations that you work with. So you're affiliated with those can populate your information in your ORCID record once, and then you can reuse the information from your ORCID record when you have to provide that information to other organizations. So the idea here is to really kind of enter the information once and then reuse it often. So reuse it when you're applying for funding, reuse it when you're submitting for a manuscript submission for publishing. So all of that is really having the data entered once and reusing it often. So not every organization or system uses ORCID in this way yet. So we still have work to do. So the best approach is to keep an eye out for the green ORCID ID icon. So what you're seeing here. So when you are working with this type of organizations, and if you see it, use it so that you can save time by signing into a system using ORCID, importing information from your ORCID record to fill forms, report activities, and sending information from other systems to your ORCID record for future use. So again, that idea of enter once, reuse often. Now that you know what ORCID is and how it can benefit you, it's time to get your own ORCID ID if you don't already have one. So if you don't have an ORCID ID yet, or if you don't remember whether or not you have an ORCID ID, go to orcid.org/register. On the first screen, you will input your first name and last name and your email address. It is recommended to add more than one email address so that if you lose access to one email account, you can still access your ORCID account. One of the things that you're probably seeing here on the screen is that if you enter, say, an organizational email address, so if you work for an organization, maybe like a university or a funding agency, it will actually tell you that this is a professional email, and then they always recommend to add an additional email as well, so you can access it at another time if you leave that organization. So next, when you're signing up or registering, is you will set your password for your ORCID account, as well as your notification settings, which we will talk about shortly. And then you register for, and then if you're using And also if you're using organizational account, it will actually oftentimes pre-fill this information for you. But you can also go ahead and add this information, your current employment, if to make sure that you can have that affiliation right away. And of course, if you don't want to put that information in, you can always skip this step as well. And this is the visibility settings, or the permissions that basically the how to set up your visibility settings on how your orchid will appear, um, um, either publicly or to other organizations that you trusted. So basically, you will be setting visibility settings. So you have an option to either say um, everyone. So that visibility setting, this has to do with who can see the information on your ORCID record. So the options are everyone, which means by default, the info in your ORCID record will be publicly visible online. The other option is trusted parties, which means that the only organizations that you authorize will be able to see information on your ORCID record. And finally, there's an only me option, which means the information will be completely private and only you can see it. So we will talk more about these visibility settings shortly, but I will say that in order to get the most value from your ORCID record, the public setting is always recommended, or the trusted parties setting. You can always change the visibility for specific entries in your ORCID record if there are certain items that you want to remain private or not publicly visible. And we will cover that as well. But once you have registered for your ORCID record, um, you will also have to basically check on the terms of use and all of this information here, and then you click on complete registration. So the other thing also, if you happen to register and you forgot that you forgot that you have an ORCID ID, it will actually, the system will also check. So this will tell you, for example, that this particular email address, email is already existed in the system. So you can go ahead and sign in with that as well. So this really kind of prevents to accidentally register for multiple ORCID IDs. So once you have registered for your ORCID ID, if you already have an ORCID ID, you can log into your ORCID record at orcid.org/login. Note that you can also choose to use your Gmail or Facebook credentials to log into ORCID. Or if you're affiliated with a university, you might also be able to use your university login credentials to log into ORCID by clicking the Access through your institution button. All right, so registering for an ORCID ID is the first step, but remember, to really benefit and save time with ORCID, you need to make sure you have information populated in your ORCID record. So adding information to your ORCID record is pretty straightforward. Remember that the more information you have in your ORCID record, the more it will serve to distinguish you, and you can save more time with interacting with ORCID-enabled reporting systems. The ORCID record provides space for you to include biographical information about yourself, including the also known as section, where you can list any other names that you have used, employment and education information, memberships and service, invited positions and distinctions, funding that you have received, and works that you have produced. One important thing to note before we get started is that you have full control over the data in your ORCID record. So the researcher is always in control of their data, your privacy, and your visibility of your data. So when you're logged into your ORCID record, you can control the visibility settings for each piece of the data in your ORCID record by clicking the edit button here, or the pencil icon, and then you will be able to see a drop-down menu, so as shown here, basically looking at the visibility setting for each entry that you have. So right there. So you can choose, so we've talked a little bit about this earlier. So you can choose between three different settings. So the first is everyone, which means that the data will be public and anyone on the internet can see this information. Only me, which can only be seen by you. So this is completely private. And finally, you can choose the trusted parties option, which means that only individuals that you designate or organizations that you connect your ORCID ID with will be able to see this information. So with these visibility settings in mind, let's get started with populating our ORCID information in our ORCID record. So that said, information can be added to your ORCID record in a few different ways. You can add information to your ORCID record yourself, so the idea of adding it manually, or you can designate a trusted individual to add information to your ORCID record for you. For the works and funding sections of ORCID, you can use the built-in search and link wizards to claim items to your ORCID record, or you can connect your ORCID ID with organizations that you work with so that those organizations can add information to your ORCID record for you automatically. So again, not all organizations are set up to do this yet. So you will just need to ask and look for the ORCID ID icon on any systems that you may be using. So for the employment section, you can click on add employment and then type in your information in the box that appears. You will start typing the name of your organization and select your organizations from the drop-down that appears, which will pre-populate some of the information for you. You then just need to fill in the details of your employment and click add to list in the details. To fill in the details of your information, and then you click add to list. And then the more employment history you can include, the better, of course. You will use the same basic process to add your education information. So go to your education section and click add education, start typing the name of your organization and select it from the drop-down that appears. Then fill in your education details and again, either click save changes or add to list. If you're currently in school, your university might be able to add your education information to your ORCID record for you. So you might want to check with your school to see if this is an option. Additional areas in the ORCID record that you can manually enter information include the affiliations or professional activities section, which is qualifications, invited positions, distinctions, memberships, and service, and the biographical information as well. Now, if you don't have time or if you have an assistant to help you, you can designate a trusted individual to add information and update your ORCID record for you. So when you are logged into your ORCID record, you can click on your name in the top right corner of the screen and then click on Trusted Parties in the drop-down that appears. On the Trusted Parties page, if you scroll down, you will see a trusted individuals section where you can search for and designate someone as a trusted individual in your ORCID account. So you can only make someone a trusted individual if they also have um, an ORCID account. But ORCID is free, so it's really free for anyone. So to register, so an ORCID ID can be used by researchers and contributors. So you don't necessarily have to be a researcher to have an ORCID ID. So basically, you can have your assistant create an ORCID ID and be a trusted individual in your ORCID account. Now, I want to take some time before we dive into details in adding your publications in your ORCID record. Earlier, we discussed how publishers are asking about your ORCID ID when you are submitting your manuscript or in the process of publication. So depending on the publishers, The ORCID ID can be added to the DOI or the Digital Object Identifier metadata of your publication. So this metadata, this DOI metadata is then pushed to Crossref. Crossref is one of the two DOI registries in the US. By having your ORCID ID in the DOI metadata, especially in Crossref, Crossref can automatically add works or publications to your ORCID record as long as you have given them permissions to do so. So how can you provide permission to Crossref? Some of you might have noticed that you have two or more Crossref entries in your ORCID record, two entries in your work section with slightly different source names. So you'll see Crossref, and down below you'll see in the two, which is Crossref, basically the name of the researcher via Crossref metadata search. There are two ways that Crossref pushes works data to your ORCID record. So example one, which is Crossref as a source, is an auto update process in which Crossref automatically pushes the works to your ORCID record. So they will automatically push that works data to your ORCID record. So to enable this functionality, your publisher will have to provide the works metadata to Crossref, and then Crossref will then notify you via the ORCID inbox to add this work to your ORCID record. We always recommend to use ORCID as much as possible throughout the research ecosystem, and you can also ask and encourage your publishers to add your ORCID ID in the metadata, so your works can always be findable and linked to systems easily. Now, in example two, what we're seeing is the Crossref metadata search. So this is a way to claim your works through the search and link wizard in your ORCID record. Now we talk a little bit about that. So the search and link wizard, let's kind of dive in a little bit on that. So the works section is down towards the bottom of your ORCID record. And if you click on the button to add works, you'll see a drop down with different options for different ways you can add works to your ORCID record. Of course, you can always add works manually or using any of the other options, but to save time, I recommend using the search and link options first. If you click on the search and link, you will see a list appears with various publication databases. Each of these databases is integrated with ORCID so that if you have publications in any of these sources, like PubMed, for example, or Crossref metadata search, you can search for them through the database and have them added to your ORCID record without having to retype them all manually. You may or may not have works in the available databases, depending on your discipline, but I would encourage you to look through these and try connecting with the databases that might contain your works. If you have any works that have been published in journals, or if you know you have works that have DOIs, which stands for Digital Object Identifier, I recommend using the Crossref metadata search indicated here. All of the search link wizards basically work the same way, so I will show you how this works using the Crossref metadata search. You will first be asked to authorize Crossref metadata search as a trusted party in your ORCID record, so they can add your work's information to your ORCID record for you. So when you clicked on that, that particular search and link wizard, it will take you to this page to authorize access. You will be, once you give that authorization, you will be taken to a search page where you can search within Crossref to find your publications. You can go ahead and search based on your name, which is filled in by default, or if you know the DOI for your work, for example, you can include that as well. I will start just with names right now. So we're actually using my colleague Sheila Raymond, and hit enter to launch the search. A page will appear with search results, and ideally, you will be able to find works that belong to you. You can always adjust the search terms in the search box at the top as well. Now, we actually have some filtering here, but I believe currently right now within Crossref, this is not working. So you will just see the list of publications that's available that you can add. to ORCID. When you see a work, for example, that belongs to you, so what we're saying here on that first one, for example, you can click Add to ORCID to have it added to your ORCID record for you. So just click on Add to ORCID. This should appear, once you do that, this should appear in your work section with the source as your name via Crossref metadata search, or the name, if you're using another search and link wizard, the name of the search and link wizard as well. So your name and the other names of the search and link wizard. Now, if you are a seasoned researcher and you have a lot of publications already that you don't have and it's not available in ORCID, you can also add works to ORCID by importing a BibTeX file, which you can download from various sources such as Google Scholar or Zotero, for example. You can always export all of your ORCID works to a BibTeX file as well if you need to get those works into a different system or format. So here, you can import your BibTeX file to ORCID and have it added to your ORCID record. And you can also export the file, your works in ORCID into a BibTeX file as well. There we go. Now, let's talk about funding. So next, you will want to add funding or past funding information to your ORCID record. In the funding section of your ORCID record, when you click Add Funding, you can see that you can either select Search and Link Wizard or add manually. Start by selecting Search and Link right here, and then you will see an option to choose Dimension Wizard. Dimension is a funding database that is connected to ORCID. So you can find your funding awards in the database and have them added to your ORCID record for you. So right here. So again, the same thing as what we've seen with Crossref metadata search. Once you click on it, you will be asked to authorize a connection between your ORCID record and Dimensions Wizard so that Dimensions Wizard can add your funding to your ORCID record. Now go ahead and click on Authorize. This will make Dimensions Wizard a trusted party in your ORCID account. You will then be taken to a page that allows you to search for any past funding you have received, either by searching based on your name or on the name of the grant. So here, if we search for library, there's an option to, there would be the different grants that have library in the name. So once you have done your search, a list matching grants will appear. So if your name, or you can select using the title. So you can select which one of or more of the grants that belongs to you using the check boxes on the left next to each listing. Once you have selected your grants from the list, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page and click Next. And then you confirm the selection and click Submit to ORCID. So from there, you can go back to your ORCID record and you should see the funding entry with the source indicating that it came from Dimensions Wizard. So here's an example. We have that example of library, and then Sheila added this via Dimensions Wizard. So if you can't find any past grants in Dimensions Wizard, you can always add them manually as well. All right, so last but not the least, also know that trusted organizations can often add information to your ORCID record for you if they are configured to do so, to do that, for example. So keep an eye out for opportunities to connect your ORCID ID with various organizational systems and platforms that you might be using during your publishing, grant funding, and reporting workflows. So trusted organizations are authorized through the same process that we saw when you connected with Crossref, for example, and the Dimensions Wizard. Typically, when interacting with the systems, you would be asked to connect your ORCID ID where you would log in to ORCID and authorize when where you and click authorize when asked for permission to connect. Once you have connected your ORCID ID with trusted organizations, you will see this um, in your ORCID record if you go to your trusted parties. So those organizations will appear listed in your account settings under trusted parties. So here, for example, are just some of the organizations or systems that I have given permissions to be a trusted party in my ORCID record. So you have Clarivate, for example, Dimensions Wizard, DataSite, and Crossref Metadata Search. For trusted organizations, the thing to remember is that basically any organizations that has enabled their systems to work with ORCID can ask for your permission to add authoritative information to your ORCID record for you. So you don't have to worry about adding it. Here are a few examples where we can see that organizations has written information to their ORCID record, where the source of the information is the name of the organization rather than the name of the individual. So with this in mind, it's a good idea to authorize permission anytime an organization asks to connect your ORCID record. So the information in your ORCID record can essentially be verified by organizations, saving you time as well as so you don't have to worry as much about keeping your information up to date. With that, we encourage you to use your ORCID wherever possible. So again, just look for that ORCID green ID button. So you will see that in different systems if you're applying for grants, submitting manuscripts, perhaps working with your institutions and your universities. All right, and just to kind of wrap us up, I just want to remind everyone you can always ask questions at any time by emailing us at orcidus@lyrasis.org. My colleagues are here to support you if you have any questions about ORCID. That's what we're here for. And then with that, I just want to thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, we can go through that as well. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen and we can have a conversation. All right, so do we have any questions right now? So it's quite a lot of information. So just a kind of a reminder, we will be sharing the recording as well as the slide deck. And I think we will have that information. I think chat savings. So we will do some kind of a summary of our conversations today with all the questions that being asked, and we have some answers for those. And we will add that when we share the recording and the slide deck as well.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat a little bit earlier about Mendeley. Can I use Mendeley or equivalent to put my publications in ORCID? Mendeley is one that I'm not super familiar with, but I was able to find some documentation online about Mendeley having an integration with ORCID. So I put a link into the chat there. If you have a Mendeley profile, you might want to go in and see if you can find, they refer to a button or a link to connect your ORCID ID that should be on the left side of your Mendeley profile page. My understanding is that Mendeley is owned by Elsevier, which also owns Scopus, for example. Scopus definitely has an ORCID integration. And Scopus is actually one of the search and link wizards that you'll find in the works section of ORCID that Paolo covered. And those search and link wizards are a really good place to start in terms of trying to find your publications and have them added to your ORCID record for you. Web of Science is another one that it's not a search and link wizard, but if you go to Web of Science, if you have a profile on Web of Science, you can link your ORCID ID and sync up your publications and peer review, for example. And then there are a few other databases that aren't search and link wizards in ORCID, but that do have ORCID integration. So Hein Online is one of those. If you have a profile in Hein Online and you go to your profile, you should see a place to link your ORCID ID and link up your publications. And then also another one on the top of my head is the Smithsonian, the NASA ADS. I forget what ADS stands for. It's like astronomical data research data. So there are a few systems out there that are linked up with ORCID. They're not necessarily a search and link wizard. The search and link wizards is a good place to start. But I would say any system that you're using that is helping you keep track of publications and stuff like that, just keep an eye out for the ORCID ID icon. And if there's anything about linking your ORCID ID, I would go ahead and do that. And I'm seeing another question that just came in about changing your professional email associated with your ORCID account if and when you switch institutions. So yes, it is recommended to try to always have more than one email address linked to your ORCID account. So for example, your institutional email address plus maybe your Gmail email account in case you leave your institution and you don't have access to your institutional email anymore. And you can always go in and add additional email addresses. You can manage the visibility of your email addresses in ORCID. And I just put a link into the chat with a link to some documentation about managing the email addresses that are associated with your ORCID record. And I see a hand up from Stephen.
Yes, I have a question about whether you will consolidate two pieces of information. Suppose I submitted something and then a trusted partner also imported something about the same paper, for example. Would that be
Yes.
consolidated into one, or we have to go in and delete one?
Yes. So it is possible to group works together. So if you added a work to your ORCID record and then it gets added from Crossref or from another source, you can, okay, so if those work entries have, if the work has a DOI, for example, then ORCID will recognize that the same DOI or the same identifier is being used for both works, and it will automatically group those duplicates together. But if for some reason the works don't have a DOI, or one of them has the DOI in the entry, but the other one doesn't, you can also manually group works together. And so Paolo is showing that, but I've also put a link into the chat with documentation on how to group works together manually. So Paolo, do you want to take over?
Sure, hold on. All right, sorry. Sorry, I can't find my Zoom controls right now. So there we go. Hold on. All right, so here we go. All right, so hopefully you can see this. All right, so as Sheila had mentioned, that if your works are using basically an identifier, so such as DOI, the ORCID will collapse them together automatically. So you'll see here, for example, so I have the one article with the same DOI, and then they get collapsed together. One information was coming from the Crossref metadata search, and the other is actually a manual entry. So you'll see that. And then you can choose how you want it to appear in a way. So you can choose a preferred source. So we always recommend choosing, say, the most validated, the most authoritative of the two. So that would be coming from a search and link wizard. Now, if you're manually adding works and then you just have two works together that are not collapsed, you can collapse them here. So you basically select the works that you want to put together. Now, let's pretend that these are the same works. So just click on the boxes, and then under actions, click on group selected works. So when you do that, they should basically get collapsed together with having an option to which one do you want to show as a preferred source. Okay, I hope that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, do we have any other questions?
There's one more that just came in saying, I have an ORCID ID already with my Gmail account. How can I connect it with institutional mail? So if you sign into your ORCID record, on the left side, you will see a section for email addresses, and you can just go in there and add your institutional email address. Yeah, there we go. So there's an email section. You can see that, you can add another email address if you want. You can manage the visibility of your email addresses, and you can remove email addresses by clicking the little trash can icon too. So I would just go in there and add your institutional email account and then save that, and that will do it for you. And then in many cases, for example, if you're at a university, most universities are already set up to allow you to sign into your ORCID record using your institutional credentials too, so you don't have to remember your ORCID password. So that's another thing you can look into. And I think that's all of the questions that I have seen come through the chat. But if anyone does have additional questions that might come up later, feel free to email us at orcidus@lyrasis.org. I just put that into the chat. We would love to hear from you. We can help you, or at least point you in the right direction if any questions related to ORCID come up as you move forward.
Great. Thank you, Sheila. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Like Sheila said, just email us at orcidus@lyrasis.org. Have a wonderful day.